Everyone, this is your host, George Ukuru. I'm very excited to welcome our special guest for today's episode, Vivek Giridharan. Vivek is a TDM architect working for a financial services company in the US. He has spent more than 16 years in the software testing, what do you call, field, mostly into data testing and test data management space all through the 16 years. Vivek, welcome to the Automation Hangout.
Thank you, George. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. And
You're
really
welcome.
excited.
Yep. So, Vivek, today we would like to hear from you about your experience implementing test data management solution. And I would like to start the discussion by asking you a very, very basic question that is related to test data provisioning. So, as you know, there are several ways in which one can actually provision test data. You can actually use masking technique, you can actually use synthetic data generation, you can use virtualization, many other techniques. So, from your experience working in this stream for the last decade or so, what is that you've seen working out of these various methods that are available when it comes to test data provisioning?
Sure, George. So I'll start with what has been working is mostly the customer need or the
Hmm.
demand. So in most cases, all capabilities may not be available or has to be built from scratch. So it's our TDM team's job to decide whether you use like the production copy, synthetic data, data virtualization. So starts with the awareness of product offerings on what is available today to the
Hmm.
customers to consume. So say like through a product page or a catalog, and how to like say like get engaged with the test data request, how to get started. So over the
Hmm.
past years, data provisioning has been mostly successful with like production copy. So when I say masking, subsetting, the important thing is you'll get the referential integrated data.
Hmm.
So, and also it makes sure that data is available like upstream, downstream, satisfying the real scenarios.
Hmm.
The difficult or the challenging part is putting the right security measures when it comes to like taking sensitive fields. Say like in a financial services, you have like critical risk data, high risk data. So you have to make sure those are masked while bringing into like a non-production environment.
Hmm.
But it can serve like different test phases like regression, end-to-end testing phase. So organization can go for their own homegrown solution. Or there are like market leader tools like Informatica, IBM Optim, Broadcom Test Data Management, which was the grid tools,
Hmm.
CompuWave File and many more. Uh, Coming to synthetic data, like off late, I've seen like a lot of uses, especially in like component integration, even performance test.
Hmm.
The challenge is understanding the underlying data architecture. Without this, one cannot even start provisioning a test data. And
Hmm.
you have to involve the right SMEs, product architects to design that flow. And even in my experience, of late, synthetic data is being used for like unit tests. So
Mm.
what we are using today is like GenRocket. So I've been
Okay.
in the school for like 4 5 years. It's
Hmm.
like really promising. It provides like an open up AP architecture where it helps to like integrate with the different testing framework tools.
Hmm.
So this is what like prod copy synthesis. Virtualization is something new. I haven't experienced much, but like in labs. The one of the powerful feature I see is the bookmarking and rewind. And
Hmm.
also heard deep started using for specific test types. The challenge is there is like limited tools and the
Hmm.
masking capabilities that has been offered is not like very powerful like others.
Hmm.
So to answer, I'll say like 80 to 85 percentage production copy and 15 to like 20 percentage synthetic. That's my experience. But what I see is over the course of years, the rules like GDPR, CCP,
Hmm.
and many more in like which are still in like the ideation phase. Synthetic data, I see like probably like 50-50 in the future.
Mm. Okay,
Best
that's a
thing
very,
is
very interesting. That's very interesting to know. So there's a shift towards synthetic data. So why I asked that particular question was because like many of us when we actually started our career, production data was the only thing that was available. There was not much of options to actually generate synthetic data. And now it's very interesting to see that you had some success with or a good amount of success with synthetic data generation as well, and you're actually using a combinational approach where you're actually using both masking as well as data generation for your test data needs. So
Definitely.
that's very good to know.
That's how we have say like hybrid model, right? It's not
Hmm.
always everything can solve its production copy data.
Okay.
But out of all like virtualization, synthetic, this whatever prod copy, most important point which is needed is once the data is copied into like a non-prod, let's say a gold copy or any environment, you should enable that service in the form of UI. UI in the
Hmm.
sense like business testers to consume the data or
Okay.
like through an API for the automation teams. If you cannot
Okay.
provide for the like self-service, it is very hard difficult. What it helps us, it enables automation. It
Hmm.
increases test coverage and like reduces cycle time.
Okay. And the wait time also can be reduced with the self-service, right? You don't
Of
have to
course.
wait for someone to put the data for you. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes.
On a similar note, Vivek, one of the common problems that I've seen is basically, let's take an example of something like regression testing. So most of the test cases that you might be executing for a regression cycle is not going to change in your future cycles. Also, almost like I would say 90% of the test cases would remain the same, and the same is the case with data also. But very often, what I've seen is like every time you need to execute these regression test cases, I see a lot of activities happening around setting up the same test data every time. So, what is your point of view around reusability of data? Is that something that can be implemented as part of your test data management solution?
Yeah, definitely. So what I can say, like many things. So at least to start with the basic, what you hear from TDM is like the gold
Hmm.
copy database. So we have to work with our consumers to get the right gold copy criteria and the
Hmm.
required combinations for the business functions. And not only like connecting that, it should go through the refinement process also because day to day the change needs, and we should make sure that gold copy is updated. So by having that gold copy available, there is always we can refresh from gold copy to our non-prod environment as per the
Hmm.
testing. That's one thing. And also like what is available today, like I spoke about the product catalog, right? So we
Hmm.
should be enabling that in some like centralized repository, probably like a
Hmm.
GitHub, like where developers can search, or like a portal where like the consumers like business users can know. And one of the examples I can say in financial services is like building tools like account generator, right? So
Hmm.
you can have credit card generator or
Hmm.
bank account generator or transaction generator. These are like very common. If you take a
Hmm.
simple bank, right? So you'll have credit card. You can have different types of credit card like student
Yep.
card, those cards. So it's good to have those solutions already identified and
Hmm.
start designing those. So
Hmm.
that's one thing which one. And as I told about the form of different service, like you should build like what we have is test data management APIs,
Okay.
or probably like building a pipeline through it. So that today in the world of like DevOps, many are like want to inject data in their pipe. So
Hmm.
enable those functionalities and
Okay.
also identify reusable patterns. So
Hmm.
when you say when you work with different testing organizations, right, you understand this pattern and make
Yep.
those available.
Yep.
And probably like a last point, track metrics, right? So any
Okay.
capability you roll out, you should know from day one what is the usage. So
Hmm.
what this helps to enhance or like to even decommission, right? So
Yep.
that way we can make sure the reusability is maintained.
Yep. A very interesting point. You touched upon one particular point, which was a lot of interest for me, which was basically around what you call seeing pattern across customers. And there are a lot of standards that I've seen where you can actually build prefabricated data. For example, HL7 is a good example. It's very complex to actually create data for HL7 testing. I've seen use cases around BI to mostly around financial services, or it can be even fire or anything of that sort. So there, if you just look at standards, I think there are enough use cases that we can actually go after where data can be reused across customers. And definitely there are enough use cases where you can actually bring in usability across projects or within a project itself. It's a very interesting thought. You
Yeah.
actually, what you call, summarize it very well, Vivek.
And
So,
healthcare,
yeah.
you mentioned about health HL7, right? So
Yeah.
similar in financial, you would have heard about Swift file,
Yes, Swift. Yes, a
Tata
very good
file,
example. Yes, it's a very
ISO,
good example. Yes.
all
So,
publicly available. So we don't
yeah.
have to like think through even.
Yeah, there are many. That's correct. So the other challenge that I've seen around TDM is mostly around end-to-end testing. So where you actually have to execute test case across multiple applications. You're testing a large business processes. You may have to deal with multiple data sources, and also at the same time, you also need to make sure that there is referential integrity maintained. So, what has been your success around setting up data as well as provisioning data around end-to-end testing?
Sure. So in my experience, I'll go with I have experience with product copy and synthetic data as well.
Hmm.
So with so I'll start with the example of production copy, like masking, subsetting, bringing in the right thing, right, and also
Yep.
that good copy process.
Yep.
Important point is what is the cadence? Whether are you
Okay.
bringing it monthly, weekly, quarterly, or what will
Hmm.
be the process?
Okay.
And thing is understand the customer what is working and changing those need as per the need and refining the gold copy criteria.
Hmm.
That's what in as heavily work for end-to-end tests. Another
Hmm.
example like in so one of the retail industry, so when I say retail, right, it starts with the product which they offer. So it was like
Hmm.
a retail customer, they offer like dresses, pants, saloon
Hmm.
items, truckable items. So what we did went with like a synthetic approach. So what it means is, what is the business process involved in this item, ordering an item, adding to like
Hmm.
a cart, applying coupons, adding an address. It can be international, it can be like local addresses.
Hmm.
Identify that list of items with certain prices. All are like
Okay.
different. So you don't have to identify like thousands or like even millions. So
Hmm.
what we had is only like a 50 categories and like
Okay.
5, 10 items from each item.
Hmm.
And we worked with the different SMEs from different areas and made that available on a daily basis. It can be like
Hmm.
even weekly, but what we want to make sure is on a daily basis, say like 8 o'clock in the morning
Hmm.
when customer comes in or a business comes in, they should have the items to test. So we had a
Okay.
refresh process which runs at like 6:30 a.m. in the morning within like
Hmm.
10 minutes since being a 500 items. And like we had offshore also. So we again made it like 8 p.m. our time. So in offshore timing also, these items are always active and is ready to test. So we provided, okay, this is for business, this is for regression, this is for performance. So in my experience, both has worked, but product
Hmm.
copy is more easy. It will bring all the data together. But if you have the time or like a strategy to work out, like what is the every customer comes with, okay, I want it like today or tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
So if you have like a certain amount of time, that's where we need to define what approach we should take.
Okay. But I like the approach that you actually suggested, looking at the business processes and then finding out what are the data models or data elements that are required as part of the business process. Normally, the approach that people take or companies take is basically look at the entire set of applications, and you actually get lost when you're looking at from an application standpoint. Rather, if you're actually going to a business process level and then identifying the data, you're actually narrowing down on the problem. You may have to deal with maybe like 5 databases, but only with maybe like 2 or 3 tables in each database. That actually simplifies the problem, and then the other advantage, you will be able to show value to your customers or your what do you call leadership very fast, because you're actually you can tell that I've done this for this business process. Now I'm going to look at maybe XYZ business processes. That's a very
Perfect
interesting approach
example.
and a unique one.
Perfect example. Like I'll say in the case of bank, right? So there is something like personal loans, student loans, home loan. Start with a, like a simple personal loan, right? Show that
Hmm.
success. And what I've seen from this example, right? Teams started coming. Can you build a process for this flow?
Hmm.
So quick wins plus overall like a big picture. So that is something I was able to build for that retail.
That's a very interesting what do you call point. And the other aspect around TDM is you touched upon is basically provisioning of data. And most of the time, you're actually dependent on a centralized test data team for data provisioning. So, are there ways in which the dependencies on a centralized team can be reduced? And do you have you tried something of that sort in your experience?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Probably I'll try to answer in the form of, so probably you would have heard like people process technology, right? So
Yep.
probably I'll
Yep.
try to explain in those areas. So
Hmm.
starting with technology, right? So having like a reusable assets like gold copy.
Mhm.
reusable tools like in the financial, as I told about the account or like Swift file generator or like
Yep.
whatever. In healthcare, HL7. Again, I told about identifying the patterns and making it available for consumption, right? API.
Yep.
And finally, the continuous refinement of these assets as per the changing business needs. That's technology.
Mhm.
From a process standpoint, okay, what is the cadence? What is the cadence
Mhm.
to bring the data? What is the cadence to refresh the data?
Mhm.
And also you can build communities. So
Mhm.
it can be like in organizations and like Yammer is very popular.
Yep.
And we have something like quality community of practice, right? So what we have done, like when you achieve a success, right, go and like share what you have done.
Mhm.
Educate the customers what is available. There is
Mhm.
something available within us is extreme automation guild. So we
Mhm.
do share success story and what is that enabled automation. So we
Mhm.
share knowledge. Conduct so last year in our organization we conducted something like a test data a month. So like
Mhm.
immersion workshop. So rather than I go and talking, right, I invite customers and I show them their journey, what they have done. Say like for a
Mhm.
bank example, for a card example, and like show me videos. So what is that? Okay, take the business process and see like how they, so instead of like explaining all, try to show what is there in like 3 or like 5 minute video which
Mhm.
generates interest so that people can come to you, or like
Okay.
conducting lightning talks. So this is
Mhm.
all like, so the last one is the people, like definitely I'll go with engineering and operations, so it's not always one can do. So
Mhm.
have focus on engineering team to build out new capabilities or like enhance as per the need.
Mhm.
Operations team can be like the frontline customers. So say like
Mhm.
any issue comes, right, they should know whom to reach out.
Mhm.
So in a today's world, as you told about the agile or the centralized team,
Yep.
you should know whom to contact so that it will reduce the cycle time or the bridge the gap so that they can get the test data in the way they want. So
Mhm.
that's my approach. So
That's good to know. And you're also touching upon DevOps when we started the conversation. So, did you have success in the past integrating test data provisioning into DevOps pipeline? And are you also seeing a trend, a general trend in the industry where organizations are interested in even provisioning data as part of their DevOps pipelines?
yes, of course. So probably I'll share my story here itself, right? So I think I'm basically with Gen Rocket. So one of the customer, he came to me. We were discussing through a coffee chat. So he
Mm-hmm.
wanted like specific test data. So from production, they wanted to test like with certain customers, so they can get only from those. So he wanted to copy that specific set of data,
Mm-hmm.
and we were still in that productionized process for whatever the production copy. So
Mm-hmm.
I proposed the synthetic data approach.
Mm-hmm.
So either Gen Rocket had like the online tools where the trainings where you can go itself and learn. So what
Mm-hmm.
this person has done is he went on, he learned by himself. So what
Mm-hmm.
he did is, so when you take a checking account, right, you can have a like individual customer, a beneficiary associated with. When you
Mm-hmm.
do a transaction, it can be before 3 p.m. or after 3 p.m. So a lot of permutation combination. In this criteria, for a particular combination, that defect was or whatever issue was happening. So
Mm-hmm.
what testing team was doing is they were doing a risk-based approach. They were testing
Mm-hmm.
only like certain combination, not all.
Mm-hmm.
So GenRocket had something like a permutation combination feature. So
Mm-hmm.
he was like a value stream architect and he
Mm-hmm.
knew what is the architecture behind it. So he was able to define the scenarios in the GenRocket tool.
Mm-hmm.
So it took probably 2 3 months to build the first checking account. But
Mm-hmm.
over the years, it was more like a configuration, not like even writing a code. What he was
Mm-hmm.
thinking is writing a Python code. So with
Mm-hmm.
GenRocket, he was able to configure whatever the scenario. So later, journey started in 2018 and he built like money market account or like IRA accounts or
Mm-hmm.
different types of IRA accounts, personal loan accounts, student loan accounts. So even
Mm-hmm.
this year we had something like a debit card launch. He was
Mm-hmm.
able to configure within like an hour. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all the passion what you see. So
Mm-hmm.
what, and coming relating to the DevOps, right? So what he had done is whatever he did. it can be integrated. So the what are the scenarios in Git? When needed,
Mm-hmm.
it will be called to this GitHub. Not only
Mm-hmm.
this platform team, right? Other teams started consuming this because the capability is already built. So they have to
Mm-hmm.
just call this job and integrate to pipeline. So this is the one of the perfect examples. Today it happens. Previously, this pipe data generation was happening like thrice or four times a month. What I heard
Mm-hmm.
recently is he is executing that weekly thrice. So the
Mm.
moment the code is deployed with, he has a month. So week one onwards, he run like weekly thrice. So like shift left, finding defects in the early cycle. So that's the trend I've seen in DevOps. Not only that, like we have something called data and analytics here.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to test the new features. Say like, okay, I need to identify like a patterns of grocery. If I am using a card for grocery, what is probability that I will use for travel?
Mm-hmm.
I will
Okay.
use for like restaurants. So they need to develop this again in their pipeline with this capability. They started leveraging this. Uh,
Mm.
Many more stories, but at least these are the two things which popped up in the DevOps
Yeah, but
world.
that very good to know. So the normal problem that I've seen in organizations, if they have not integrated DevOps or data into the DevOps pipeline, is you actually create infrastructure, you deploy your application, and then you wait for a couple of days to actually get the data into that environment, which actually defeats the purpose of entire DevOps, where everything should actually happen automatically. So it's very interesting to know that there has been a lot of progress in this space. Vivek. So the other question, maybe this is maybe something related to the team structure. So we have seen different models for test data. There is an independent model, and there is like a hybrid model where you actually have testers provisioning data or creating data, as well as so there's a team to do what you call data provisioning or data masking. So what is the model that you have seen working, and what would be the future as well around the team structure for test data management?
Sure. So probably I'll start with so we are all from testing background, right? So there was
Yep.
period where people were asking why testing is required, but
Hmm.
now testing has like evolved.
Yep.
Automation has evolved. So what I've seen as a trend is like test data management is evolving. And if
Hmm.
you look at all the market leading test data tools, right? Just look at their page. They talks about test data automation. Okay,
Yep.
how it can integrate with test automation frameworks, how it can integrate with CID, CI/CD processes.
Yep.
So to answer your question, like uh, I recommend there should be like engineering team definitely within it. What are the organization,
Mhm.
and they can like build solutions, expertise. So everyone don't need to like understand all the tools, right? This test
Yep.
data management can learn and probably deploy a test data engineer within the line of business. So
Mhm.
he can be the face for the customer and he can be the face for TDM team. So that way,
Mhm.
there's a gap we can like bridge.
Mhm.
That's what I've seen like more working.
Mhm.
And saying about the future, right? So I was recently researching on many, like what is the TDM market, right? So
Mhm.
what I understand is many organizations conducted study like in 2015, 2016 with as a base. So
Mhm.
the TDM market in 2017 was said to be like 584 million, and
Mm.
they are
Okay.
projecting 720 by 2020. By 2027, they are projecting around 1600 million, and
Mm.
maybe even more. And like the what the prediction is like compound annual growth rate is like from 36% from 2020 to 2027.
Mm. Okay.
So if you take a global region wise also, right? The biggest consumer with respect to the product or services is actually Asia,
Mm.
then
Okay.
followed by Europe, followed by the rest of the world. That's how it is.
Okay.
And
That's a
maybe
very
I
very
can,
interesting number. Then do you know like why the Asian numbers are high? Is it because like a lot of outsourcing happens in countries like India, where you need to actually do masking and other activities if you want to actually work with customers, maybe in the US?
yeah, I think that's one answer. And not only that, like many privacy laws are now coming into place. You have heard about CCPA
Ah,
or
yes.
GDPR already implemented, right? So
Yep.
as we talk, just like this is all through Google, right? I
Yep.
hear in US, many states are actually producing their own. So this is
Hmm.
going into come into existence, and not only in US. I've seen like even India, it's drafted now
Yep. I know.
as we speak. So to uh, get accustomed or get ready, we should be preparing ahead so
Hmm.
that we can like that's where I told like synthetic data will play a very important role. That so even the study shows today it's like showing mostly on subsetting mask,
Hmm.
but over the period, synthetic data is going to have more impact. This will not go away because definitely we need production data. This is going to stay, but the usage will come down. That's what the study reveals.
Mm, okay.
And what I can say, probably I can say an example within my organization called there was something like operational excellence. So
Hmm.
what is operational excellence is to reduce the 50% of production incidents.
Mm,
So
okay.
when we analyzed, what we have found is many of this were related like test data or probably like not tested.
Mm,
So we started getting a lot of issues with which can impact the customer, right? So that's what we focused and we were able to like deliver. So what is this? It's quality and
mm,
quality at
yep.
speed in today's world.
Yep.
So that's where I see like TDM will definitely exist and it will evolve.
Mm,
So we should, as I recommend, organizations should think strategically and invest on TDM practices for like efficient rollouts.
mm. That makes sense. And so I think the future is very bright around TDM. So if an engineer, maybe he can be a graduate who's actually coming fresh out of college, or he can be someone, or he or she can be someone who's already working in the software industry. So what are some of the skills that need to be acquired if you want to build a career around test data management?
Sure. So probably I'll tell from my experience itself. So
Hmm.
I started in a testing organization, right? So you should know that testing different concepts, different types of testing, and where actually the test data is needed in the software testing lifecycle.
Hmm.
To start with, I think ETL, extract, transform, load. So that is something you should learn. So
Hmm.
before coming into actual TDM concepts, so like subsetting, masking, synthetic data, or the virtualization of pipeline. So it's always good to know like at least one good industry tool. So to name a few like Informatica, IBM
Hmm.
Optim, Broadcom TDM, CompuWare File Aid, synthetic data, GenRocket, Delphix. So
Hmm.
even I heard recently spoke with like K2 View, that is
Hmm.
also evolving. Tonic.ai. So Curiosity. These are like startups.
Hmm.
So they have very promising features as evaluate these.
Hmm.
And this was actually the TDM probably 3 or 5 years back, right? What I
Hmm.
understood is with the evolution of DevOps, a TDM professional should have knowledge of building pipelines or
Hmm.
at least to enable through pipeline through using like tools like Jenkins or like a harness or
Hmm.
whatever you build like prod copy or this thing, right? You should able to like build wrapper APIs so that it can
Hmm.
be enabled in a consumptional format. Most importantly, the underlying architecture, understanding of business process. I think without this, one cannot implement any TDM concept as per the customer need.
Mm, okay. The last point was very important because many people feel that, or many companies or leaders feel that this data management problem can be solved using a tool. But that's not the case. You need to actually have various other skills, especially domain or business process knowledge, in order to even define the data model, or even if you want to do masking, you should know what field should be masked in which database, and which business process actually touches upon which tables in the what do you call backend. That's a very interesting thought, Vivek. We've run short of time, Vivek. So we'll have to conclude this episode of Automation Hangout. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing some wonderful insights around test data provisioning. You covered a lot of tools. You also walked us through the future of TDM and also explained about what one should be doing in order to get into the test data management stream. So it was actually a pleasure hearing you for the last 30 minutes. And we look forward for more conversations with you in the coming days. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, George. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.